You are listening to the Practicing the Art of Small Business podcast with Shannyn Merlo and Julie Parker. Join their conversation about business, leadership, and the self-awareness journey to greater success.
Hello, Julie and listeners. Welcome to Practicing the Art of Small Business. Julie, how are you?
Shannyn, I'm great. And as we oft do, we forget about the viewers. Hello, viewers.
How are you, viewers? Our viewers and our listeners, because if you are viewing us, you can also listen to us, or if you're just listening to us, you can view us on the YouTubes. So, Julie, outside of my ability to talk about YouTubes, today I'm wondering whether on episode 26 we can talk a little bit about burnout.
Well, Shannyn, I think that's a marvellous idea, considering that who knows when people are listening to this, it'll be months out, but we might still be in lockdown. Who knows? Here in Victoria, we've been in lockdown for over 200 days now.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think burnout is a fantastic topic because more now than ever, people are struggling with things that they never used to struggle with when life was normal, if I can say normal.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think small business owners are really can be susceptible to burnout. And also, I think as small business owners, we have a responsibility when we're seeing team members heading towards burnout. There's plenty of things that we can do about it. And I thought that today would be good to talk about it because it does affect a lot of us. We can look after ourselves to control it, but often we kind of go down the pathway of burnout and don't realize we're in it until we're really in it. So if we can help our listeners to understand what causes burnout and then how to deal with burnout, then we might be able to stop someone from completely burning out and they're just a little bit singed.
It's a marvellous idea. Like, be singed, but don't burn out. Like, singed. That's good.
There's just that weird smell when you burn hair.
You might be having a stroke, or it might be burnt toast, or it just might be being singed, on your journey to burnout. We did clarify one thing, didn't we? We didn't know whether it was burnt out or burned out. And then we found out that it's just burnout.
Yes, you schooled me. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Google.
Thank you, Google. Julie, have you experienced burnout yourself or components of burnout, do you think?
I actually haven't.
Okay.
And which is why when you said, let's have a talk about this today, I did have to look up burnout because I have not experienced it before. And when I did look at it, I could then see, it's a journey of, feeling on top of things to becoming overwhelmed, to it then affecting your daily routine and the way you think about life. And it can lead to depression, which is something that we all want to try to avoid as much as possible.
Yeah, absolutely.
And your experience with burnout?
Yeah, well, I think I was potentially heavily singed earlier this year. I might not have got to complete burnout, but I absolutely went down a road earlier this year. And one episode that's really uncomfortable to watch, but it is life on the YouTubes, was the episode Shannyn is Overwhelmed. And that, that was really uncomfortable for me to watch back because that was at sort of the midway point of probably this period of burnout that I went through. And you could, I can see now how stressed and how overwhelmed I was, but it wasn't just overwhelmed. There was a lot of emotional stuff going on, and it kind of got worse. And then I took some time off in April and sort of started to kind of rebuild after April. So, if you want to kind of see burnout happening in progress, go back to that.
She wasn't rocking in the corner. I was forcing her to continue recording.
How are you, Shannyn?
Fantastic. Let's go. Good day for a podcast.
And so, yeah, so it's probably not the only time I've had those sorts of feelings, but this year was certainly a real challenge. And some of the symptoms that I experienced were when I sort of went through those phases of burnout was I had really, really bad decision fatigue. And which is why this podcast came up today, because I had another client who sort of said to me, Shannyn, I'm not in the greatest space. I'm really, really anxious and I can't make decisions. And I'm like, let's talk about what's going on. So decision fatigue for me was a really big one. And it got so bad that I literally, like, I couldn't decide what to wear. I couldn't decide what to eat. I couldn't even decide whether to delete a marketing email or not. Like, that's kind of the level of decision fatigue I got to, where I just couldn't make these decisions. So, as well as pretty bad anxiety, also some insomnia. I wasn't sleeping very well, and a big sort of procrastination and apathy. So for me, it was a lot of apathy where I was just like, I don't care anymore. It's all just too hard. So I think it's really important for people to consider, are you experiencing any of these symptoms, and could it be as a result of burnout? And we'll talk about what can lead to burnt out and burnout and what we can do about it. When it probably, I don't know, Julie, was it hard to watch me for you? Because it was hard for me to watch me back then.
And as is always the case, that our self-perception is so wildly different. I thought you were coping quite well. You were just talking through what was going through your mind at the time. But you looking back over it, you would have absolutely tapped back into your emotional state at the time and felt that trauma again. So I can understand why it would be difficult to look back over that again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So what was your prelude to that period of time? Can you identify the things that were going on in your life that led you to that moment?
Yeah, well, if I look at the list of things that kind of contribute to burnout, so some of the common things that contribute to burnout is a lack of control. So if we feel like things are outside of our locus of control, we can get caught up in the frustration of life and feeling, and I suppose this might be more for employees. So looking out for employees when they feel like they can't control the outcomes, that can actually create emotional disturbance. For business owners, I think it's more around we know that we're in control, but I think sometimes we lose what we can control. So for me, there was a bit of a lack of control thing going on. It was under the surface, though, I think because the decision fatigue had started to come through, I could control certain things, but because I couldn't think straight, I didn't feel like I could control the things because I couldn't make a decision about it. Does that make sense?
It does, yes.
One of the other things that talks about or that leads to burnout can be extremes of activity. So again, I've sort of experienced this when I've undertaken a really big project or a really big task, and this happens a lot to people when they go on holidays, right? Holidays. What's a holiday?
You're in Victoria, man. What are you doing taking holidays? You're not allowed to do that.
I'm going to spend some time in a new corner on the weekend. It's going to be awesome.
The kitchen corner rather than the office corner. Ooh.
It's so different. But we, quite often when we're leading up to a holiday, we'll work really, really, really hard. And then we get to the holiday and there's that sort of moderate burnout where our bodies get sick. Quite often people get sick when they take a holiday. And that's because of that extreme of activity. So for me, in the lead up to the fall down, there was some real extremes of activity and quite a lot of stress and pressure that I was under. So I think that as a business owner, it's really important to think about, like, where are my stress levels? Like, where's my emotional capacity to deal with these stresses? And if your cup is getting full, then that's when you've got to start to take action to bring yourself back right. And I used an analogy with this particular client. I said, right now, your capacity bank account is in 100% arrears, like you are in the red. Now, even if you invest in self-care measures to get to zero, you're still at zero. So it's going to take quite a bit to actually build up your resilience to kind of have a bit of a bank of it. So it's going to take a bit of time for you to kind of get through this. So I think that's one of the things that we need to be aware of, that if you are feeling these feelings related to decision fatigue, anxiety, avoidance, having trouble sleeping, things like that, demotivation, sickness, it's not something that this is such a limiting belief, and I don't know if it is, but if your body is in burnout, it's a physiological thing. It's not that easy to turn around the next day and go, no longer burnout. I am good. I'm good. I've got a new mindset, because actually your brain and body need to catch up, because it's now physiological, which is why decision fatigue happens. So definitely for me, it was lack of control, extremes of activity. Some of the other factors are lack of social support, so lack of connection. And I think that sometimes feeling alone, feeling like we're on our own, and that we're not either not being supported, or that we're on our own. I think that factors business owners. That's a factor that affects business owners.
I think with that aloneness, sometimes we forget the value, or we don't instantly recognize the value of just sharing how we're feeling about stuff, and getting the stuff out of our mouth and having it expressed. And sometimes people help you with their words of advice, and sometimes it doesn't help you, and it frustrates you when they're trying to advise you. But just, what is it? A problem shared is a problem halved. We don't recognize that actually in itself does have value. But when we're feeling a bit low and down, we tend to become a bit more insular and actually take ourselves away from other people around us as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I definitely don't want to go on a gender discussion, but stereotypically men are more likely to just soldier on and just keep going. So I think that having people that you trust in your network, that you can actually, and it's the same for women, but women tend to talk more generally, stereotypically. I'm not one. I do talk a lot, but maybe not about my
You've spoken most of this podcast episode.
Yeah, I was about to say, just only therapy on the podcast. So I think getting support is a really important factor. And I think, I don't know, Julie, this might be where we just promote our role. Like, when has there been times where you've supported a business owner through sort of challenging times, and you've been that support voice?
I've noticed mostly when they tell me all their frustrations, however unreasonable they may seem on the surface, and I say, I get it. Every business owner feels the same way.
Yeah.
They're like, oh, I'm not alone. It's acceptable. It doesn't mean I'm doing anything wrong. It's all part and parcel of the package. Yeah.
That's so validating, isn't it? It's one of the things that I love for clients, is to go, everything you're experiencing is 100% normal. And that look of relief, like, oh, good, it's not just me.
Yeah. Everyone stresses about bad conversation. Everyone worries about their income flow. Everyone's looking for that great next person to fill in and start being productive in the business. Everyone worries about their future. What if I fail? We're all quite common with all those core things that drive us as human beings, and the things that we're fearful about.
Fear is one of those things that wasn't in the research that we just did, that I saw. But for me, fear and that ruminating thought, I love a rumination. That ruminating thought was, I love a rumination.
Time for a good rumination.
I love a rumination. I love just a deep dive into the depths.
How bad do I actually feel?
And I feel worse. So that definitely perpetuated the problem. But there's a real question of chicken or egg, right? Because the rumination, I think, was my brain's attempt at trying to make a decision and trying to feel in control and trying to make sense of what to do next. And it just then became this circle. So definitely getting support is a really big one to kind of pull out of your head, getting that sort of thing. So I think they're some of the ways that can affect burnout.
And can I throw in there as well, I think a common fear could be, I fear I'll tip over a point and I'll just keep getting worse and I'll lose any control over myself. I fear I'll tip over a point and then I'll have depression for the rest of my life. It'll be a struggle for the rest of my life. I fear that if I take too long in this space, that it's going to be the habit for the rest of my life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I can't talk of anyone else, but I know when I've been in those states, there is a fear that this is how life is going to be, because it's very hard to think. And what it might be helpful for me to give my interpretation of how the brain works under these conditions. And we've got our prefrontal cortex, which is our complex thinking part of our brain. And that works really, really well if all of our basic needs are covered off, if our survival needs are covered off, and if we're safe and we're okay and we're not under stress and all the rest of it. Our prefrontal cortex is like, woohoo, now let's go and work out how to take over the world. But under stress, the prefrontal cortex, it actually starts to shut down. So that's why decision-making and fatigue and things like that happens, because our brain function actually reduces. And so because the brain is now kind of shutting down into survival mode, it can feel like this is going to be forever, because your brain can't think past this basic survival need to a future where it's better, because it's actually not there. And so I think that if anyone's kind of feeling in this state of burnout and are feeling like this is going to be forever, there's a good reason why you feel that. It's not going to be forever, but there's a good reason why you feel that. And this is why getting support and taking action is so important, because that future version doesn't necessarily exist yet, because it's too clouded by the current pressures that the brain's under.
Yep.
That's not medically defined at all.
You're not a doctor. That's okay. We decided at the start of this discussion that neither of us are doctors or experts in the field. We're just having a chat about it, which possibly makes me feel comfortable in stating my next thing. Okay, it's going to be wildly unpopular.
You can always edit it out.
Hey, when we have a cancer in our body, we can have a test done. They say, see, these cells here indicate you've got cancer. When we've got a broken bone, we can say, see the break, the X-ray, we took the X-ray and there's the break. When you've got a rash, they say, see, it's red and blotchy and all the rest of it, there's the rash. To my understanding, there's actually not a chemical compound test that they do after taking your bloods or anything like that that say, see the markers, that's tipped you into depression, or that's tipped you into burnout, or that's tipped you into anxiety. My personal, not accepted worldwide across the board, my personal internal belief that I've told my brain is that my happiness, effectiveness, beliefs around life and how I intellectually move through my life is completely and 100% up to me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So if I'm feeling, and when I went through divorce and I sold my first business and all the rest of it, went through anxiety, had the blues, They said that it was depression. I don't agree that it was depression. I think when you have a marriage breakdown, you sell your business, you move out of your home, you move back in with your mum, who is absolutely delightful. So she made that nice and easy. Then got a new relationship, then moved into an apartment, and all of that is ticking off a whole bunch of major stresses in life. And so
Absolutely.
I was just adapting, coping, moving through a process. That wasn't depression. And certainly when I was talking to somebody at a function, and this person, for whatever reason, I must have been putting out a vibe, started telling me about, they've had depression for a number of years. And I said, what age were you when you were diagnosed with depression? 21. Oh, and how old are you now? 78. And I tell you what, I still remember that conversation because I'm thinking to myself, that's not going to be me. I don't have depression now. Okay, that's it. I don't have it anymore. It's not going to dominate my life for the next coming decades until the day I drop. And so I do have the belief in my brain that if I'm stressed, if I'm overwhelmed, if I'm anxious, if I've got depressive tendencies, that's up to my brain to fix. And only I can fix it. There's no tablet that can fix it. I mean, just look at the ineffectiveness of antidepressants. I think they only work in 20% of the cases or something like that. And so I do move through my life going, well, that one's all on me. What am I going to do to make sure that I don't go down that path and that I do catch it when I'm singed rather than wait for burnout? But it sounds like I'm going holier than thou, up on my high horse and rejecting all of the psychological evidence and medical evidence of many testimonies. And I say, that's okay if everyone feels that way, but I just wanted to put that out there.
You've touched on a really good and interesting point. And I think that one of those things about a lack of control is that when we feel like we can have control, then we absolutely can change our reality. One of the things that you've reinforced there is that mindset that you have where no matter what is going on, you have control. You are not a victim of your circumstances. You can actually affect this outcome. You can affect your mindset, your physiology, your psychology, and all that sort of stuff. And I absolutely believe that to be true. Absolutely. I can only talk about my own personal experience. And what I would love to suggest to listeners is take from this whatever is helpful for you for where you are right now. Because if actually, when I asked this client and I said, I think that, you're kind of in this phase of burnout, does it help you to label it like this so you can take action related to that? And for him, he was like, it has really helped me to go, if my body is burnt out, I now have to invest in self-care activities to look after myself. So it had meaning for him. I also 100% agree that if during this period of time I was, instead of just powering through with the extremes of activity, if I was taking time for self-care, if I was breathing really well, if I was modifying my physiology, if I was making faster decisions when I could make faster decisions, if I was getting support when I could have got support, then I wouldn't have gone down this burnout pathway. I do feel like it did get to a point where my body just stopped functioning. My body and brain stopped functioning. So the ability to wake up in the morning and go, I can have a great mindset. I can do this. I can change this. This is not my reality, became almost impossible. I just couldn't think that way. But I think that what you've got is you've got such a strong sense of your beliefs around that control that it wouldn't get to that point. And so this is where perhaps for our listeners, if you're probably perhaps maybe a bit more predisposed to a Shannyn thing of like, it's all good, it's all good, it's not good anymore. You fall off the edge. To be aware of some of the things that start to happen. And I think physiology is a good one. Like if you start to have problems sleeping, if you start to have insomnia, breathing properly. So breathing is one thing that actually diverts attention into your prefrontal cortex, because it actually calms your body down, it calms your system down, it calms the nervous system down. If you're not digesting properly, or you've got headaches, or you're constantly sick, then all of these might be indicators that something has to change before you get to the point where things get tougher. And depending on how you approach the problem, the solution might be longer to get to than what it might have been in the past.
Yeah. And I remember that when I was going through that patch of my life, it is difficult to force yourself to think a different way. And one of the processes that I did was I stopped waiting for myself to feel like feeling better. And instead, I started adding in all the positive stuff, even though it wasn't resonating. I'd forced myself to read the positive book, read the positive quote, listen to the upbeat music, and I would force myself to do the helpful, to kind of have the input that's going into my conscious brain. I was forcing it in, thinking if I don't force the positive in, then I'm allowing the negative to reside. And I think because I spoke to that guy and I had that fear of, gosh, if I let this go for too long, I'm going to tip over an edge and that's going to be the end of me. I'll be really hard to control it. I think that was an incentive. And there's, it's now that we're talking now, we've spoken before about how I'm a great motivator for me is the anti-goal, running and screaming away from the terrible future you don't want, making sure you make the great future you do want right now. And so maybe that played a role in it as well. So what I did find is that, you don't feel like doing it at all. You don't feel like positive self-talk. You don't feel like reading up on affirmations or going for the walk, that positive walk. But I was so conscious of, I'm just going to have to force feed myself the positive, empowering stuff, whether I feel like it or not, because it's got a greater chance of working for me than if I don't do it.
Yeah. And I think that impermanence understanding, if there's a way to at any time remind yourself that this is impermanent, that the way that you feel today is unlikely to be forever if you take changes, if you make positive changes, and if you continue to make those changes. So one of the things that happened for me is I did stop all of my self-care activities because I kind of felt like I need to reset something. And I was always, I'm quite conscious going to the gym and meditating and all the rest of it. But when I went through this phase, I was like, something has to shift. And fundamentally, I actually stopped most of the good activity, which was enough of a reset to then get back onto okay, now what I need to do is I have to exercise regularly. I have to go outside for a walk. I have to focus on meditating. And exactly that, like meditation for months, and I meditate nearly every day, and I quite enjoy meditating, get to the point where I'm like, all blissed out and, But during this phase, I found it really hard to meditate. I got no joy from it, which is why I kind of stopped doing it. I normally listen, I've mentioned Jordana at night. I normally listen to her to say, my evening kind of wrap up. I had to stop her. But there was a point where it came back. And I think that if we're aware that it's not permanent and that we can actually change, and when we can, is to bring back those self-care activities and do them even if, as you said, do them even if they aren't helping yet, because they will actually help you to get there quicker and sooner.
That's for sure. And we were talking earlier, this is our second online session today, and our session this morning, which Shannyn's taking a group of us through a coaching program, which has been so powerful, I tell you.
Oh, thank you.
And one of our attendees was saying that at the moment we're in lockdown. I have to homeschool my two young children, and they're of an age where they need that constant attention during the homeschooling, and I've still got to run my business. And she was obviously overwhelmed. And we mentioned then that, be responsive to the space that you're in, and maybe shifting your expectations about what you can try to achieve by the end of a day, a week, a month. That needs to shift and change, because if we're not flexible with the number of plates we're spinning on those sticks, as you say, if we can spin 6 plates on a stick on sticks, that's fantastic. But if we're underslept, undernourished, feeling bad, negative thoughts processes going through our brains, all the other stuff, we're going to have to start taking some of those plates off. Otherwise, they do all crumble and break on the ground, which sounds like what burnout is.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. And I think we talked in that session about acceptance, and I think that's a really good place to start. So if anyone who's listening, because they've sort of been feeling a bit burnt out, having a sense of acceptance of this is where I am right now, and something has to change. Something in me has to change today in order for tomorrow to be different. And so one of the big things that I would recommend, and this came out of the session that I had with that client, was how can we take some plates off? Like, how can we actually lighten the load so that there's enough space to start to actually recalibrate and take a breath? And what we did, and this is where getting support can be really helpful, what I did is I kind of helped the client work out, well, acceptance, like here's where you are right now. Is tomorrow going to get any better on the basis of, if nothing changes, is tomorrow going to be any better? No, it's not. If we did something differently, would tomorrow get better? Yeah, it probably would be. Right. So what we ended up doing is really prioritizing what has to be done, like now, and what really can actually be prioritized to another point in time. And we looked at building up some support processes. And for this client, it was actually just taking some time off. So, and they'd had holidays planned anyway, but they just, instead of going, they're just going to another corner of the room, but just to have enough space to actually take a breath and look. And so what we did is we actually looked at, well, what can he control right now? What can he remove from his plates to give him some more space? And the idea of creating space was to actually help the thinking process. So being able to take a breath. And when I say take a breath, there's the metaphorical breath, but actually the physiological breath, again, parasympathetic, sympathetic nervous system, get into the parasympathetic deep breath, calm the brain down so that you can actually then make better decisions. So definitely self-care is one of the ways to actually help move out of burnout. Self-care, introducing really great sleep hygiene. So if you aren't sleeping well, if there's insomnia going on, really, I would probably say, and I'm pretty sure that this would be backed up by a lot of medical practitioners, because sleep is...
Drink wine before sleep? Is that what you're about to say? I agree with that wholeheartedly.
I mean, that's Shannon's prescription for life, but but I'm always reminded by my wonderful guru / chiropractor that alcohol does not actually improve your sleep. It does. Yeah, apparently not. But I don't listen to that. I only listen to things that actually help me and serve me. But some great sleep hygiene, and probably the biggest one, if anyone's in burnout, I'm going to say raise your hand if you're using your screen before bed, if you're working right up until the death knock of when you can't actually hold your eyes open anymore, and then waking up 2 hours later. Big no-no. So I'd really encourage people to start to think about their sleep hygiene. And actually, in fact, any business owner, really, sleep is like a performance-enhancing drug. Like, get into it, literally. Get on it. Get on sleep.
And I think, you talking about, I haven't heard of sleep hygiene before. I haven't heard of hygiene being, but it makes sense to me. And the thing that's conjuring up in my brain is, and this is possibly something that's more, since we're just doing gender specific roles here, which I'm more than happy to do. This might be more of a woman thing, but if I went through a period of insomnia for a couple of weeks many, many, many years ago, decades ago, and I still remember it because it's awful. You end up looking at the bed and hating it because you know what it represents to you now. It's this trauma. So maybe buy fresh sheets. Make sure you make your bed beautifully every morning so it's a welcome place to go to. Put your lamp on beside your bed maybe an hour before you go to bed so it's this nice, welcoming, warm space to kind of go into, and do whatever you can to make it a glorious space. And a friend of mine years ago told me how much she spends in money on pillows and doona covers and all the rest of it. And I was like, you spend what? How many thread count is your sheet?
I just resent my sheets if I then had insomnia on the basis of my beautiful sheets.
She said, we spend a third of our life in bed. Why wouldn't you make it one of the most glorious spaces to be? And I thought, gosh, she makes perfect sense.
Yeah. Yeah, you are right though. I've had a number of periods of insomnia. There was a point there where actually I was employed back in the day, and I think I was on day 4 of no sleep whatsoever. And so when I say no sleep, like maybe an hour at best, but essentially no sleep. So day 4, I'm just a mess. And someone at work sort of said to me, how's your sleep going, Shannyn? And I just burst into tears.
I punched her.
And a colleague had said that she had had insomnia, and one of the strategies that a sleep doctor had got her was that she wasn't actually allowed to sleep for a couple of days. So her partner had to spray her with a water bottle like a cat every time she was going to go to sleep. And I'm like, well, I kind of live on my own, so it's a slightly counterproductive, but okay. The idea that it was a reset. But what works for me, and earlier this year during that Extremes of Activity, I spent 2 weeks with insomnia. And the reason why, I was doing Excel documents in bed in my head. I was like, I wonder how I fix that thing. If I had a formula that did the thing. Yeah, crazy. Yeah. But I think the point is acceptance is a really good one to have when you've got insomnia, to just go, this is how I am, what can I do? Definitely, again, deep breathing exercises can be really helpful. And even if it's just focusing on that breath in a meditative state, eventually the brain kind of does reset itself. But if insomnia is a really massive problem for you, definitely go and see a sleep doctor for some strategies to improve it. The other thing that is probably the biggest thing outside of getting support, which we talked about, and I think just going back to my challenges, one of the big things was that I wasn't being supported in the business, and I was having some challenges with clients that I didn't have someone to bounce off. And you and I did a lot of chatting, but they were kind of more business activities. Whereas on top of that, I had some client challenges where I didn't know if I was helping the client. So one of the strategies that I put in place was to have a mentor now that I talk to about client-specific problems so that they can actually support me to help my clients. So definitely making sure that you've got support systems in place when you're running the business. So it might be mastermind group, it might be business partners, it might be a coach, anywhere where you can actually get support to help you make decisions. And the final thing that I'd want to encourage people to do is to look at what you can control, that biggest thing of what, that feeling of lack of control, and to bringing it back to what can you control, what can you take advantage of, and using your strategies, Julie, around, in the morning I can get up and I can control my mindset, and I can control my physiology, and I can control, what pants I'm going to put on. Just going back to my decision fatigue.
Am I going to wear? You're very, very helpful, Shannyn. If I can contribute another couple.
Of course you may.
You're very kind. I love how you said acceptance, because acceptance of where things are at means that you no longer put resistance up to it. And, we're going to talk about resistance on a future podcast episode, because it just stops progress so rapidly and makes us busier than we need to be and more stressed than we need to be. And so we'll concentrate on resistance at one point. But once you accept the way things are, there's a term that I've got, how in a court of law, if something happens that's not ideal and the other person puts up opposition to it, the judge can sometimes then say, I'll allow it. Like, it's usually a piece of evidence. I'll allow it.
Mm-hmm.
I started using this, I'll allow it. Like with when I was going through my difficult time, I stopped enjoying reading books. I used to be quite the crocheter and knitter.
Oh,
and
I'm sorry. Hang on. Sorry. We've got a segue here because this is brand new information for me. I did not know that you were a crocheter.
From a very wee age, Mum had the three of us girls learn crochet and knitting from a very young age, and we always had projects on the go. Always. And even into adulthood, always. What are you doing? Here's my blanket. What are you doing? Here's my jumper. Oh, wow, you're awesome. I know, so are you.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Well,
And
there's
then
your self-care activity.
Well, then I stopped enjoying those sort of things. And we can put resistance up, but I won't be better until I enjoy my things again, the things that normally gave me joy, like going for a nice walk in the park or whatever the thing might be, cooking, building a craft thing, like a hobby horse for a child. I don't know. What men have? They build things out of wood.
I thought you were going to say building a raft, and I was like, okay, sure, you do you, Julie.
I gained a lot of enjoyment from building a raft.
Just stay within your 5 kilometre radius for the moment, okay?
Find a stream close by. But instead of resisting that and thinking to yourself, well, I'm not going to be better in my brain until I start enjoying life the way I used to be before, then allow it. I'll allow it. I'll allow the fact that maybe I've grown out of that habit, or I'll find different things that create happiness for me, or just for the moment it's not happening, and that's okay. I'll allow it. And then you stop putting up the resistance to it, so then you can start looking for the things that may help you moving on down the path. And when we're talking about the plates on the sticks,
the spinny plates,
one of the things that Charles has very clearly in his mind are his values. His top value is his health. I could say, you have to forego all your runs every day, otherwise I'll divorce you. He'll divorce me. My health is I know it's hard to imagine that he would ever want a life without me.
Who is he?
I don't know. But health is so high on his values list that when he does have too many plates spinning on a particular day, he knows which ones to drop because he's made that value judgment. And so with our friend this morning, for example, her high value is her children. So make that firm decision. As you said, control the controllables. Make that firm decision. As long as I don't let that plate fall, I'm successful at the end of the day. As long as Charles exercises every day, he's achieved the main goal that he wanted to get done for that day. Even though there may be 20 things he wanted to get done but couldn't, he still feels successful because he's held to his values.
Yeah, that's a really, really great point. And it is definitely one of the strategies that was suggested to me. I'd come across a concept during this period that I was in the valley of despair, which is common for entrepreneurs. Like when you're going, yeah, and then fall off the edge, and in the valley of despair, the strategy that was suggested to me was to look at your values, look at what's most important to you, and take action based on those values. So one of the value, and I sort of, my big value is about communication, but also health and well-being. And then probably there's kindness, and the kindness value really kind of resonated with me. So I was like, I've got to put acceptance in place and show kindness to myself here in order to move through this. Stop resisting this feeling, stop hating on myself because I'm not progressing or I'm not where I want to be. Show kindness so that I can then take the self-care activities to then improve things.
Yeah.
Really important point.
Another really I've got this one from Charles as well, like many of my life lessons.
He's a valuable resource, that man.
That's it. And that is stress, problems, pressure, overwhelm is part of life. And again, so don't resist it. So when it does happen, don't sit there and think, oh, something must be wrong. I feel stressed more than I normally would, or I feel overwhelmed. Something must be wrong. Whenever something negative happens, some Charles may be talking to somebody that he's coaching, and they've obviously said, "Oh, this terrible thing's occurred," and he says straight away, "Great." Great does. That's instant acceptance. Great. Let's get over the hurdle of accepting it. Great. We've accepted it. Now what's the next helpful thing we can do towards that? As I've often said to clients and to myself, we don't need the solution all the time. If the solution's not obvious, what's the next helpful thing?
Yeah.
And even though I was joking before about, wine before bedtime can help you sleep well, is it helpful? No. So what would be a better helpful thing instead of doing that? And maybe meditating before you go to sleep would be the next helpful thing I can do.
Well, again, this is definitely not on the recommended list, but I did actually drink a lot more during this phase. But one thing it did do is it gave me a reprieve from that ruminating thought. And actually, when what the acceptance that I've kind of given myself is like when in that state, do whatever it takes to feel better, within limits and reasons and all the rest of it. And for me, actually having a bit of extra alcohol than what I normally would did actually give me a little bit of a break and gave me enough of space to then go, okay, now I need to do more space, and I'm ready now to cut down on the alcohol, to reinvest in my health values and exercise more and sleep better and meditate more. So it did actually give me a reset. So maybe not put it on the list, but that definitely did help me.
Yeah. And I know that I've certainly experienced it in my life that, when things starting to get, more distressing and all the rest, I drink a little bit more, but then it tapers, as you say, as things improve again, the mental space improves again, it tapers back off again. And so it seems to be more of a symptom of what's going on rather than the cause for any issue in some situations. In other situations, if you're really, using it as a long-term crutch, then it's going to be troublesome.
Yeah, definitely wouldn't suggest that alcohol is a coping mechanism that should be maintained on your list of self-care activities.
Yeah, and if the Garbo, I saw this meme on Facebook just this week, if the Garbo starts leaving an Alcoholics Anonymous sticker on your recycling bin, maybe you have to have a look at what's going on.
Yeah. Look, it is what it is. But yes, that did help me to reset, recalibrate.
And one of the final things I tend to, well, you and I both come back to this, I think many people come back to this all the time, is if things are depleting in one area, build up gratitude. And I read a quote and I've extrapolated it out because for me it's true. Gratitude and fear can't exist at the same time. And gratitude and anger can't coexist either. So if you're feeling that there's an area that's troubling you, then really boosting up that gratitude can be enough to make you accept what's going on around you, embrace what's going on around you, and just thrive in the moment that you are so grateful for all the things that are around you. It starts to make the other stuff feel smaller.
That's a really, really great tip. And I think that if there's anyone who's in that space where meditation isn't helpful or gratitude's hard to find, again, just do it until it feels better. You'd be grateful for running water or the electricity being on or a bed. Like one of my big ones is when I do a gratitude thing, I'm lying in bed and geez, got to be pretty grateful if you've got, it's not 300 thread, 1,200 thread Egyptian cotton, $300 sheets that your friends got, but definitely just having a warm bed that I get to sleep in every night. Geez, I'm pretty lucky, aren't I? Because there's plenty of people who don't have that as an opportunity. So yeah,
for sure. Well, this has been enormously helpful. I've feel like that we've delved into this space, we've looked at it, we've found the helpful things that can stop us getting even worse than singed. We want to try to avoid the burnout, avoid the space where it's all getting too intense and we're feeling at our most disempowered to do anything about it, and maintain your power while you've got it.
Yeah, 100%. So definitely. And I think even if you're not in burnout, the takeaways here is invest in your self-care activities and make sure that you've got a support network around you as a business owner, because you can't really do too much self-care and you can't really do too much business support.
Agreed. Thanks, Shannyn, for such an insightful session.
Oh, we went deep again. What was that? Sorry?
Bearing your soul again.
Oh, I'm sorry. Gosh.
Oh, don't be sorry. I love it.
Oh, well, we should just, I don't know, should we rename this the Shannyn Therapy Sessions?
Yeah, I think so. It'd be interesting to see the different demographic of listeners that jump on board and viewers. If you have enjoyed this episode, please do subscribe to the podcast or the YouTubes. And if you would like to give us any feedback, we would also love 5-star reviews. And you can, if it's anything less than 5 stars, then you can email us privately so nobody else knows about it. But I look forward to speaking to you next time.
And likewise, Julie. And likewise, Julie. Speak to you soon.